Each week over the last few months, one group has made headlines for causing disruption to public places by blocking roads, stopping sporting events, generally annoying Conservative politicians, and to be fair, annoying lots of us around the country too. Just Stop Oil have caused a bit of a fuss. But what are they trying to achieve? Why so much disruption? Is it just attention seeking, or might they actually be right? My name is Tom, and this is a little series about a low carbon lifestyle. After a meeting this week, I was chatting to a colleague as we made a hot drink. He was struggling to find the milk for his cup of tea, distracted by the pot of soy milk on the table and missing the big jug of semi-skimmed cow's milk right in front of him. It was relevant, so I mentioned how I've started having oat milk with my cereal. He asked me why, with a bit of a furrowed brow. I told him it's to reduce the amount of dairy that I have. He then asked, why? Because it doesn't sit well with you, I said, no. I said, because of climate change. At which point he said, you're not going to go and glue yourself on the street outside, are you? I joked half seriously that I might. And then we moved on with me saying that all this was to be continued. Now, I'm not someone that has taken part in direct action on climate change or really other issues that I've been passionate about over the years. But I did support the school strikers as they struck before the pandemic. And I've been involved in protests around climate action around the country. I've been to protests about the treatment of refugees. I've even been to events organised by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. I even took this photo of Jeremy Corbyn speaking here at a CND event before he was famous. Anyway, I digress. But direct action has not been something that I've felt the need to be part of. My style of climate action has been to change my career, to use my voice and to use my spare time to help reduce emissions. I'm fairly pleased with the impact that I've had over the last few years, but I'm just one person trying my best to provoke change in the way that we heat, the way that we power buildings, the way that we get around, the way that we consume. I'm one person, but I'm one person who then reads about our lack of progress in the UK in meeting climate targets, who reads about wildfire all around the world, or flooding, or ice loss, or crop failure, or the heat in oceans. And I'm one person who reads these things and wonders, what more can we do? And this is where I'm actually inspired by protesters like Just Stop Oil. They are doing more. They're causing a scene. They're turning attention onto the climate crisis. And after decades of climate science saying we need to change, or groups like Greenpeace, campaigners like Caroline Lucas or Jonathan Porritt or David Attenborough, all these people asking for change, and yes, change coming, but incrementally, and the impacts of climate change worsening, groups like Insulate Britain, Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil are saying, well, that hasn't worked. We aren't changing quickly enough. So we need to do something different. They're changing the conversation, and maybe they are right. So Just Stop Oil have caused quite the fuss this year. But what are they asking for? If they're getting the nation's attention, then we really should understand what they want. And no, actually, they're not asking for the oil industry to stop overnight. This is surely what Just Stop Oil means, right? We should close refineries, end plastic production, close petrol stations, bring the world as we know it to a halt. Well, no, the ask of Just Stop Oil is much simpler. They say that we demand that the UK government makes a statement that it will immediately halt all future licensing and consents for the exploration, development and production of fossil fuels in the UK. So at the moment, this is all the group is asking government to commit to stopping future development. And so what's the reason behind that? Why are they asking for that? Well, the executive director of the International Energy Agency, a chap called Fatih Birol, said in May 2021 that if government is serious about the climate crisis, there can be no new oil and gas and coal from now. from this year. So that's the executive director, the guy in charge of the agency advising the world about energy. Not just clean energy, not low carbon energy, all energy, including the energy we get from the fossil fuel industry. He says that if we're serious about climate change, there can be no new oil, gas and coal extraction from now. He's asking us to close the gap between rhetoric and reality. And he asked this over 2 years ago. Can you see why activists are protesting? So what's behind that? Why should we stop new licenses now? We're already transitioning away from oil and gas, right? I mean, my heat pump means we burn less gas in the UK. Your electric vehicle means that we need less oil. We're going to get there, aren't we? Well, there's a couple of points to make about that. The Committee on Climate Change in the UK this week set out their report, their annual report to government. It outlines the progress of our climate action to government. It outlines the progress of our transition to low carbon technology. And the report is damning. Its key messages say that government has a lack of urgency, that the UK needs to retake a clear leadership role internationally, that the expansion of fossil fuel production is not in line with net zero, that planning policies need radical reform, and it says lots more. On Just Stop Oil, Lord Deben, who's a Conservative peer, he's a former Conservative government minister. He's the guy who's been chair on the Committee on Climate Change for the last decade. And he says this.
I want everybody to realise just how absolutely urgent it is. They ought to be in touch with their members of parliament. They ought to make themselves a nuisance in every circumstance they can, because we have to act now. If we don't act now, it's not only disastrous, but it's also enormously more expensive. So people really ought to do it for their own pockets.
A Tory politician who is listening to reality says that Just Stop Oil are doing something right. They have to cause nuisance because we have to act now. And the second point, some reality on fossil fuel emissions. So of that untapped resource that we already know about, so the stuff that's in the Earth's crust, academics at UCL in London suggest that we can't afford to burn a third of the oil that we know about in the ground already, half of the gas that we know about, and 82% of the coal. We can't afford to burn these if we're going to hold the temperature rises to below 2 degrees. Not 1.5, below 2. So our government looks likely to grant a licence for a new oil field called Rosebank, an oil field that has potential to produce 500 million barrels of oil, and an amount, if burnt, is said to be equivalent to running over 50 coal power stations for a whole year. This is a disaster for our emissions and our responsibilities to climate change. So where the Committee on Climate Change say pushing ahead with new fossil fuel development is utterly unacceptable, our government ministers are saying that it would be economically illiterate not to invest in fossil fuels in the UK. So that's the priority. Profit over people. We're happy to make a wad of cash at the expense of the planet burning. So yeah, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. So I would say that Just Stop Oil are right. That decades of campaigns have led to inadequate progress, that we need to do more and do more quickly, and that their disruption is raising the kind of conversations that we need to have in order to take the action that we need. And yet, I'm sure that if we did stop new oil and gas licenses today, that the campaigners behind Just Stop Oil would move on to the next campaign. You know what? Good on them. It is that urgent. If we had insulated Britain, as was asked back in 2021 or 2022, we would have been shielded from the worst of the energy crisis over the last year. If we had just stopped oil, if we took away oil and gas subsidy, and if we invested in decarbonisation more quickly, then we would not regret it. So I applaud Just Stop Oil. And I'm inspired to do more in my job, with my spare time and with my resources, to talk more, to do more, to call for more. What do you think? Are we doing enough? Do you support Just Stop Oil? Do you understand what they're asking for? Where should we go from here?